Hi everyone. Um, Quick survey. Who don't speak French here? All right. Okay, we'll go in English. Okay. The joke may be in French because I'm way funnier in French and English, but well, the information will be there. The slide is in English, so you will be able to follow, no problems. So we're gonna present you what we call a project that we did, what we call a BitCluster. It's a Bitcoin de-anonymizer, but partially de-anonymize. It started like an end of study project, and it's still ongoing now. I'm now collaborating with David, that is at the UDM. And for the first slide, we're going to present ourselves. So I'm now working as a pen tester for a large financial institution. I'm also developing BitCluster, and I did end my winning strike at the Hackfest CTF this year. Sadly, I finished in second position, so congratulations to Sherbrooke. Well, I was winning since 2013, but well, oh well. I'll let David go for his presentation. You should be able to talk on your mic.
Okay, and hi, I'm David. I'm a professor in criminology at the University of Montreal. And unfortunately, I wasn't there to support Mathieu last night. I was in a bar enjoying myself. But I am now with you, Mathieu, and we should have a good presentation. So I'll let him start the presentation.
Okay, so without further delay, we'll go for the first one. What this talk is not about? Well, we're not going to reveal all the identity of all the person that did use Bitcoin in the last 4 years. We're not going to find a private key for Bitcoin wallet that you can steal money from other people, and we're not trying. At least we're trying not to generate another headline called "Bitcoin is broken" currency. So if you're a journalist in the rooms, before doing such an headline, come see us. What this talk is about, it will start with a lot of details on how Bitcoin works. We'll talk about the limit of pseudo-anonymity. So if you use it incorrectly, you could be in danger. If you use it properly, you're fine. And then we're going to show you BitCluster, a tool that we develop and we host in our dev environment. So we're gonna give you access to our dev environment so you can test your own addresses. It's a dev environment, so well, you know, dev. And we're going also David will also present you some case study. Oh, without further ado, I forgot to tell you something. We may go to some unfunded statement. So for the unfunded statement, we have like a tinfoil hat. With this hat, we can tell whatever we want, and we could do this without any proof. Okay? Perfect. Okay, before we start, we can go on https://bit-cluster.com Hackfest. You can submit any addresses. We're going to test those addresses at the end of the talk if you want to participate. So I'll let you, okay, perfect. Everyone have the link. If you have any addresses, submit it there. If you have any injuries, you can also submit there, and we're going to read it out loud. Oh, I missed it? Okay. Perfect. All right. So first of all, we're going to go with the big 101. So thank you for waiting while we bring everyone up to date. In this presentation, we'll talk about, we'll use the term addresses or wallet in this presentation. I know there's some little difference, but we're going to say that it's the same thing. It's the same thing. We did find so far 167 million wallets. They are generated by the user. So we've seen those addresses on the network. So the addresses are generated by a user. So on your own machine, you can go open your software, click generate an addresses, and it will generate a valid pair of key, a public and a private key. you take the public key, you do some magic with it, and you get a Bitcoin address. So a Bitcoin address is a simpler representation of a public key. And with this public key, you also have a private key associated with this wallet or addresses. It can be created offline. You don't have to be online. You don't have to talk to an authority to create an addresses. Whatever you want, you can create a simple addresses. You generate 2 pair of key, and you're good to go. The blockchain is a ledger of all transactions. So as soon as you do a transaction, it's on the unvalidated state. As soon as it gets included in the block, it gets validated and it's on the blockchain. So for the presentation, a blockchain is the ledger of all transactions made on the network up to date. It's the block is created every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes, new transactions are hopefully integrated in the ledgers, in the public ledgers. This ledger is public. You can download it on your machine. You can do whatever you want. So if you did understand properly, all transactions made Bitcoin are public, but you need to tag an identity to an addresses, and that's the difficult part of it. You also have transaction. To do a transaction, you refer to a past transaction when you receive money. So for example, if David sent me yesterday 3 Bitcoin, I can take those 3 Bitcoin and send them to Max or send it to another person. I can also do a same transaction linking to the Bitcoin that David sent me and send it to 1 Bitcoin to someone and 2 Bitcoin to another person. That's also a valid transaction. What I can also do, I can take 2 transactions where did I receive money. So I can link a transaction where I receive money from David, and I can also take a transaction where I receive money from Benoit. If David sent me 3 Bitcoin, Benoit sent me 4 Bitcoin, I can take those 2 transactions, include it in the transaction, and send 7 Bitcoin to someone else. That's where you commit your identity on the networks. We're going to go with this later. Because on the transaction here, you did receive money at 2 different addresses. You were able to sign those 2 input in the transaction. So here, input at 3 Bitcoin, here input at 6 Bitcoin. You were able to sign both of it with the private key associated with its addresses. So to do a little recap, you did receive money at an addresses, and you can take the private key associated to these addresses to sign the transaction. Here, what we can deduce is that you did have the private key for the transaction for the addresses where you did receive 3 Bitcoin, and you also have the private key for the addresses where you receive 6 Bitcoin. So you own both private key. What we do with BitCluster is we clustering those transactions. What we do is we take all inputs of all transactions. So here, if, for example, you receive money with wallet 1U8, 1MB, 1VC, you did also receive money with 1TH and 1TH here, and you did reuse your addresses. By reusing your addresses in different transactions, what you're giving us for information is that you own those 3 addresses. Do you have like a laser on this one? Yes. You did own those 3 addresses. It belonged to the same entity. You did own those 2 addresses. It belonged to the same entity. And you also own those 2 addresses. By looking at those 3 different transactions, we can tell that here we can regroup those addresses. So we are able to tell that 1FG, 1TH, 1U8 are owned by the same person. And because you did reuse the same addresses back again, we are able to tell that all those addresses here are owned by the same person. The point here, we didn't have still an identity, but we are able to regroup. And in BitCluster, we can go to regroupment up to like 300,000 addresses and even more. The biggest node is MTGOX and have up to 12 million addresses that are regrouped together. What the advantage of it is, instead of having to identify one addresses to one identity and one addresses to another identity or the same identity, you need to identify only one of those addresses and you taint the other one. And now in our software, we'll give it a node ID. So we're gonna explain you a bit how to blow your cover on Bitcoin and how not to blow your cover also. In this example, the person is using this wallet and sending back the change of a transaction because the transaction needs to be always equal. If, for example, in this transaction, I refer to 9 Bitcoin total, I want to send 8 Bitcoin to someone, the change, I send it back to myself because input must equal output. And that's a bad behavior because I will reuse these addresses in another transaction to spend this 1 Bitcoin change. And then I will associate those 2 addresses with other addresses eventually. So this is how you blow your cover, and this is how we are able to regroup those addresses. How to blow your cover? This one is a bit more complicated. Is if you need to receive money from three different persons. Here in this example, you have Fred, Joe, and Max. If you need to receive money from those 3 persons and you give the same addresses to all of those 3 persons, what you're gonna say is, when you want to spend the money, referring to all those 3 transactions, you're gonna say, I did receive money from Joe here, I did receive money from Max here, I did receive money from Fred here, and you will link those 3 addresses when you'll do a transaction to the same person. So you'll be able to taint and to regroup some transaction and make a link between them. This is how not to blow your cover. So to receive 3 payments, you need to generate 3 different addresses and then use those addresses separately. Here, there's nothing much I can tell. I don't know. Like, now it's simple because we put the identity and hit on it, but in the normal way with only Bitcoin addresses, I cannot tell if those 3 transactions are related. Okay, so little assumption to achieve those clustering. Transactions are signed with private key. Private key are private. So only one entity should have the private key at a certain time. So if I was able to sign a transaction with multiple input, that means I did own those 3 addresses and those 3 private key. The only one exception in here is there's something that we call multi-sign transaction. We're not going to talk about it in the context of this talk, but for your information, it's only not applicable to multi-sign transaction. Why did we do BitCluster? It's a concept that did exist a long time ago. I've been talking in multiple white papers. We have something that called Wallet Explorer that did it, but the database is not public. You can only consult it by the website. And you have something that did try to do something similarly what we did. It's called BitIodin, but sadly is not supported anymore. Why BitCluster? It's free, it's open source, and all the data is available. So at the end of the talk, you'll be able to download the torrent for all the database of all the transactions and all the regroupment that we made so far in the network up to last week. How did we design BitCluster? I'm sorry, it's really a crappy code software. If you're willing to refactor it, do a pull request. The GitHub is online. It seemed really, really easy at the beginning. Like, you regroup those addresses, you put it on a graph, you merge node, and it's fine. So we start with the tools. I will say, okay, fine. I will just crawl the blockchain, crawl all the transactions, put it in a graph. Easy, 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 easy. So I did get every block, take every transaction, take every input, calculate the Bitcoin addresses, put it in a graph, and this is what happened. I think I put it on pause. Oh, yep. Break it. Oh, my computer is freezing. All right. So with this start again and make again iteration. At this point, I've been already submitted my subject to some talk, and I was already accepted to some conference, and I have nothing that was been working properly. So I did have to find a solution, and I was able to find it. So the final recipe is quite simple. You need two computers in my case, because one computer wasn't strong enough because I didn't have like 3,000 bucks to put on a computer. You need to create a graph of every 5,000 blocks. You put it on a graph. You merge it in memory in the DB. You start building a new graph in memory and merging to a distant graph in the database. And you repeat step 2 to 4 for at least a week. And finally, you got a graph that contains all the transactions, all the addresses that have been seen on network. So for the minimum requirement for BitCluster, you need the fastest processor you can afford. You need at least 500 gigabytes of SSD. You need at least 32 gig of RAM, Python 64-bit, a week of free time, and multiple tabs to flip. Well, you can do other stuff during the 1 week, but at least you need to let the computer run for at least a week. But you don't have to do it anymore because the database can be downloaded directly on the internet. So you don't have to crawl it again. You can start from where I am now. So the stat now, number of Bitcoin wallet or addresses we've seen so far is 167 million addresses. The number of nodes is now 69 million of nodes. The largest wallet for the single transaction is still MTGOX with 12 million addresses associated to this node. And the different number of transactions is 416 million. The DB schema is here, so you have a table addresses that will do all the correlation between those addresses. You have the table for all the transactions, where you have the source and the destination, the amount, and some meta information about the transaction, when it have been made, and what block is been included. And we also have a new table that we put here. It's called tag. That's what the fun parts begin. So we're starting to put identity on node ID with information that we find on the internet. So we're going to go with live demo. Yeah. So we'll start. Better? Still a bit larger? So you start with BitCluster here. What you can do is can use the internet or any addresses that you find on the internet so far. So for this example, you're gonna go with the, for example, donation link on Pirate Bay. You can copy it. You want any bet on how many money that the Pirate Bay did receive in Bitcoin so far? Not so much, actually. Approximately $4,000 that they receive at these addresses. They have two different addresses associated with this node. So if you go here, you'll see the addresses, one pirate and the one that was on the site. You can go here and see the income. So are grouped by nodes. So instead of seeing all money movement between addresses, you see money movement between nodes. And you can see that the money is moving between this node that have, but for now, no identity. That have been sent like amount of money to the Pirate Bay. You can see it by graphs, so see how many money that this system made by day. You can see also the distribution of amount, so what are the most popular amount that have been given. And you can see also the raw transaction data here. You can also go the same thing for spending, so group by node, so where did the money go after it, group by date, group by amount, and you can see also the raw data of the spending here. And you see the addresses. And then you can link on other place, and you can follow the link here. You can go on another node and go and up, and lost yourself in this marvelous software. Here, the serious thing now. We were able to tag self node escrow payment. More on that later with David, but I'll go with the demonstration for now. And so here we were able to identify and link approximately 400,000 different addresses to Silk Road. We can see the first time I've been seen, the last time I've been seen, the money left on the account right now, and we can see that I received approximately $200 million that did travel to this escrow payment of Silk Road. And you can see the income, same thing. You can see also the spending. You can see, and then you can see that most of the income comes from common traders. So basically, people that put money on escrow payment. And what you can do here to prove that it's actually Silk Road is you can go by date. If you remember properly, the takedown have been occurred in beginning of October 2013. So if we go here, sorry about that. You can see the money here that flows approximately to like 1 million per day, 500,000 to 1 million per day. And then suddenly, here, there's a takedown. So it starts for 1 million, 300,000, 10,000, 1,000, $30. Yeah. And what you can do after it is you can go on the spending and see after this, where did the money go? So we know that have been a seizure on Silk Road Marketplace. So the money that was in the account, where did it go afterward? You can download the full CSV data of all the tab that you see here. I did download the full data of all the incomes, and I did load it on Excel. And what you can see here, as you can see here, it's at a certain point, all the money is flowing to one addresses and a single node. So it's probably the FBI nodes. So I did open it actually in the, I did click here, incomes, spending. Interesting thing also, it's after Bitcoin Fug, the long range scheme, the next is the FBI nodes that did get out approximately $3 million. And here, you see that it's the money that have possibly be owned by the FBI. And to make sure, we're going to go on the presentation, back to where we were. Here. David, you know better PowerPoint. What should I do? Here, from current slide. All right. I'm not used to office stuff. So he was elected in October 213. That matched our findings. The FBI initially seized 26 million Bitcoin. If we go back here on our finding, we did find that approximately a bit more, 29,000 Bitcoin, a bit more. And the value was estimated to, at this time, 3.6 million. Actually, when you take all the money and a bit for all the transaction, it is more estimated at $3 million flush instead of 3.6 million. On June, on June, they did sell the Bitcoin, the same Bitcoin, and it was approximately worth $18 million. What we see here is they did sell actually the Bitcoin here, and it did work at the time a bit less also, more like $17 million instead of $18 million. So I think that is for now. The other thing I did is I did go on the Ring Zero CTF and go on the donation link. I don't know if Charles is still in the room. Yep. And he did receive actually $15 worth Bitcoin, one transaction. What are you going to plan to do with this? It's worth like 50 now. So so I think that's almost it for the demo. We'll go if we have some time at the end. We'll go and check for other interesting findings. Actually, you may be able to do it if you crawl it and you include it in the transaction metadata, because you know the IP. You need to trust the IP location. That may be wrong, but actually, yes, if you want to do this and trust IP addresses, well, you can do it, yes. Yes.
Okay, so for the second part of this talk, we're going to look and we're going to try and understand how people actually use these Bitcoins. And I'm going to give you some case studies on how people have been using Bitcoins. And thank you. Because I'm a criminologist by trade, I'll be talking about hackers, drug dealers, fraudsters, so all fun people. And I'll show you that yes, crime does pay from time to time. So that'll be my presentation today. So the first case that I want to look at is actually ransomware. So you guys all know about ransomware. Ransomware is malware that goes into your computer, it encrypts your files, and then it asks you for a ransom, which is usually a few $100s that you have to pay back to get your files. And of course, when you look at their explanation, they use military-grade encryption, so you know they're very serious and very bad criminals. Exactly, yeah. And so it turns out that actually ransomware is a very, very big business and something where you can make a lot of money. And so what we wanted to do is to try and understand ransomware through the BITCLUSTER tool. And to do that, what we can do is we can actually do time series where we look at the lifespan of these ransomware campaigns. We can look at the number of victims, the revenues that were generated. And to do so, we asked a bunch of our friends to give us Bitcoin wallets that were used to receive these ransoms. And so we got about 60 back. And out of these 60, we got about 3 different type of groups or 3 different behaviors for ransomware that we were able to identify, and I'm going to be presenting them today to you. And so the first one, I just call it ransomware X, doesn't really matter, is here you see the actual, let me just increase that. Here you see the revenues for this ransomware over time, And we see that it made approximately 1,100 victims over a period of 58 days, and that it was about on average 19 victims per day and about 10K in revenues every single day. And of course, you have to remember that this is with very little infrastructure cost and very little spending on their part. And about 80% of the revenues were generated during a period of 22 days, which means that in only 3 weeks, that's when they make the bulk of their money. Which means that if we're going to react to these ransomware campaigns, we have to be very efficient and very quick. Now, in total, this particular ransomware campaign, we were able to track about $611,000 in revenues over its lifespan. And so during that time, as I said, it made 1,100 victims. It was there for a few weeks. And but this is a kind of an interesting ransomware campaign. For one reason is that it was actually kind of personal to me. And that's because the research center, which I'm affiliated with, was actually bit by this particular ransomware. And of course, didn't have any backup. And they had all of the files about the students, about the professors and everyone. And at first, they didn't want to pay back the ransom to get the files. But in the end, after a few days, they realized that, well, they kind of had to do it. And so what we did is we went on localbitcoins.com and we found someone who was willing to sell us Bitcoins. And we met this guy who strangely looks like the guy you see over here, and kind of shady and not very clean. And we gave him a couple of $100 and he gave us some Bitcoins and we were able to pay the ransom. And here you see in the little blue rectangle, that's us paying our ransom. And there were about 20 people during the same day that were paying a ransom. Now, not all ransomware campaigns are actually as successful as the first one. Here you have another example, which I'm going to call ransomware Z. And this one made about $171,000 over its lifespan. And it made about 250 victims. And what you see over here when you look at the distribution of revenues is you actually see that it keeps on growing and then it just stops abruptly. And so it's either because the people who are renting the ransomware realize that you could be tracked using your Bitcoin wallets and they just switch to a new wallet, or maybe they decide that, $170,000, it's not bad, we can retire with that, go to Thailand on a beach or somewhere. But we also actually see that it doesn't keep on going, it just stops abruptly at some point. And the last type of ransomware that we saw was actually ransomware. We only had one payment from one victim, and that was it. And these are the people that really know how to use Bitcoins. And basically, we're not going to be able to track their flow of Bitcoins just because, as Mathieu explained earlier today, they don't reuse the same addresses across multiple victims, and they make sure to send their money to tumblers on their way before their payout. And so we do see some profiles with very, very poorly organized ransomware guys and some who are a lot more professional. Now, the second type of actors I want to talk about today is the actors that are involved in online illicit markets. Now, Mathieu already talked about Silk Road, which was launched in 2011. It's basically just the Amazon where you can buy anything you want, and it's not limited to only legal stuff. You can actually buy anything that you want. And there's a lot of legal stuff on these, we call them crypto markets. There's a lot of legal stuff in these crypto markets. But as you can see over here, there's also a lot of drugs. And these markets work very well because they're hidden on Tor and because all the payments are made in Bitcoins. And here you see examples. So they're selling drugs, but one of the interesting things is more and more they're going to turn to hacking software. They're going to e-guides. And very interestingly, they're also going to have hacking services, so hackers for hire. And these guys actually have very good reviews online, but we haven't tried one yet to see if they're the real thing or not. And one of the features of these crypto markets is that when you buy something, you don't actually pay the vendor directly. What you do is, let's say you want to buy some drugs, this guy, for example, what you do is you're going to put your money into an escrow. So you're going to put your money with the crypto market, who's going to hold on to the money until you receive the drugs or the service that you asked for. And when you do, the money is going to be released to the vendor that sold you either the drugs or whatever product that you wanted. And so this means that there's actually a centralized point where all of the money flows in, which allows us to track the money. And so Mathieu already gave you an example of what it would look like. And here, there's the same thing with a graph. And here you see, for example, the number of transactions on Silk Road 1 across time. And you can actually plot the growth of the market over time. You can also do the same thing with the revenues that have been generated on Silk Road. And here you see, for example, I know it's very light, I'm sorry about that. But you see actually that the revenues keep on growing, and then at the end of the period, it just drops to almost zero from one day to the next. And so if you're looking to understand exactly how big these markets are, how many people are active on these crypto markets, you can actually look at how many transactions were made, so how many people made a purchase, and how many people are involved in these crypto markets. The other thing you can do is also look at their customers rather than to look at the market. And this is where it becomes kind of interesting. And so first of all, you can actually look at the amounts that people are purchasing. So if you look at the transfers of Bitcoins, you're going to see exactly how much people spend for every transaction. And what you see here is that people are mostly buying small amounts of products and services that are not priced very high. Half of them are under $100. I would say that 90% are under $500. But you also have people who are actually buying kilos of coke, kilos of weed on these crypto markets. And these people are kind of interesting, at least to us criminologists. And one of the nice features of crypto markets is they actually have automated feedback systems. So every time you buy something, you're strongly encouraged to go and to leave feedback about the products that you're buying. And so here I gave you two examples of people who bought cocaine. And very interestingly, someone said that their cocaine had a strong bubblegum taste. And this was actually a very good thing. So they got 5 stars out of 5 for getting this amazing taste in their cocaine. And so what we can do is we know that about 80% of the feedback, actually 80% of the transactions is going to lead to a feedback. And so this allows us, counting all of these feedbacks on the crypto markets, to show exactly how many transactions there were on these crypto markets. And so we can use this methodology to evaluate the revenues by looking at the number of feedbacks, multiplying by the price of the items that the feedbacks were attached to, and then we can generate sales for these. And Suska and Kristen, they're two researchers, actually did this. So looking at feedback, they evaluated how big Silk Road 1 was. And what you see with the bars is actually how much money went into Silk Road according to these feedbacks. But what you see is when you see with BitCluster, you see that actually the amount of money that was flowing into Silk Road was twice what we expected before. And this is, I think, not because the feedbacks don't really represent the reality of a number of transactions. This is because people had faith into Silk Road, and they would just leave their money in there, and they said, I'm going to transfer $1,000 into Silk Road, and then I'm going to buy for $500 worth of drugs, and next week when I want some more drugs, my money is already going to be in there. I'm not going to go see the shady guy in local Bitcoins to get some more Bitcoins so I can buy more drugs. And so what you see over here is that BitCluster tells a very different story than what we get using a different methodology, using the feedbacks only. The second thing is, thank you. Cheers. I was busy presenting, I'm sorry. So, after Silk Road, there's always a life after Silk Road. A lot more crypto markets arrive, and Suska and Kristen also looked at their revenues. And here you see their estimated revenues using the feedback system once again. And here you have a line with BitCluster. And what you see, and that's very interesting, is the fact that BitCluster actually is lower than the measures issued by the feedbacks. And this is very interesting because we always suspected that people were putting up fake feedbacks on these crypto markets to pump them up and to make them look more alive. And using BitCluster, we can kind of prove this. Or maybe I should put, Mathieu also made me a hat. Yep. So I have my own hat. And so we can also prove that there were a lot of fake feedbacks on these crypto markets because we see that people bought stuff, but then transfer the Bitcoins to buy them, actually. But what we also see is that the line between BitCluster and the feedbacks is actually much closer. And that's because people have lost faith in these crypto markets. They know they can be shut down at any point in time. And so they don't want to leave their money in there because it could be seized by the police at any point in time. Lastly, maybe interestingly, we can also see that there's a lot of money flowing between these crypto markets. And that was really surprising. And so people who are on one crypto market are actually transferring money to other crypto markets. And so here Mathieu was, when he was putting his ad on, guessed that that's because the NSA or the FBI is running all of the crypto markets and they're just moving money around. And But what I find more interesting is that possibly people are actually buying drugs on one market and then they're reselling it on another. So people who are drug dealers or selling hacking software or whatever illicit services they're doing, if they're on Agora market on the right, they're going to supply themselves using Silk Road 2, and perhaps on Agora they can get a better price, so they're going to resell on Agora. And so they buy online and then they go and sell online. And that's kind of the first demonstration that we have of this behavior of buying online and reselling online. And so the main takeaways is that the Bitcoin network basically never sleeps. It's always there. It's always collecting data on all of these actors. And it becomes very useful for us to gather intelligence and to understand how people are using these Bitcoins. Also, very interestingly, is even if you were not aware that Silk Road existed back in 2012, using BitCluster, you can actually go back in time, look at what happened on Silk Road using the BitCluster tool, and do your own investigation, try and understand what was happening at that point. And so it really allows you to go back in time, well, at least until 2009, and to really understand what was happening, even if you weren't there at the time. Lastly, I want to always stress that you need to validate all the results that you're looking at. Looking at the first graph where you saw the BitCluster was showing twice as many revenues on Silk Road than what Susskind and Kristen found using the feedbacks. Many journalists wanted to say that, well, Silk Road was twice as big as we expected before. Well, that's not really the case. I think many people were leaving their money on Silk Road, and it was maybe an artifact of the data, and you really need to look into it. And so BitCluster is now available online for free in high quality. You have the address over here, so it's dev.bit-cluster.com, port 5002. And this is very ironic, our very high availability dev server. It unfortunately crashes very often because it's very CPU intensive every time you make a request. So just ping us on Twitter if you see that it's down, and we'll just restart it manually if that happens. I think, yeah, and I think both our girlfriends are kind of sick of us rebooting servers. And what next for BitCluster? Well, right now, or this week, it's going to be released. Actually, we're going to add to the tool and on the GitHub, real-time automated database updating. The labeling of nodes that we've shown you today as well should be online in the next few days. And what we'll be looking into is giving you more of a visual graph of the flow of Bitcoins across the Bitcoin network, looking at some behavior analysis, and hopefully find a way to a more reliable hosting environment to host so it doesn't crash, well, very often.
Another thing, if you go on bit-cluster.com, you will be able to download the database and get to the GitHub to get the code. Database, I recommend you to wait a little bit because it's dated September 2016, and I will update with the new version that I did just before the Hackfest during this week. So before downloading the torrent available, I may suggest to follow us on Twitter and wait for our announce that the new database has been deployed in torrent.
Thank you. Cheap way to get us to new followers. Yes. And finally, well, that's it for us. You have our Twitter tags, and thank you for listening and for staying so late, and I hope you had fun at Hackfest. So thank you.